Today on Great Chat, we ask one of our industry's favorite questions. Are we in a bubble, and is this the top? Let's hope not. I'm Ashley, and I'm joined by Helen and Angela. Great Chat is brought to you by Mercury, radically different banking loved by over 300,000 entrepreneurs. We use Mercury to run this podcast and love recommending it to other founders and fund managers. It's free to get started. Try it for yourself. Visit mercury.com to learn more and apply online in minutes.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Angela, thank you for joining us from afar.
In the middle of the night.
It's like dark and rainy here in Zurich. Not very glamorous. I'm staying right by the train station. So if you hear a train rushing by, that's what it is. Can I just say, I feel like I lived in a dark hole for a few days, and what's been happening with Disney? I feel like they've been having the worst week ever between The Bachelorette getting pulled and losing $50 million, and then this whole Sora thing. What's happening?
Well, I think they just pulled out, right? Saying that they're not going to have to pay whatever they promised to pay.
$1 billion. They were going to invest $1 billion.
Isn't it also the Disney CEO's first week? The new Disney CEO?
Yes. Trial by fire. I actually I saw the Bachelorette thing in passing. I have not gone down that rabbit hole, Angela. Helen, I do not know if you have.
I know I'm not a reality TV person, but it seems really messy. And it also seems like ABC knew what risk they were taking on. So that has also come to light. And now there's a separate conversation about how much reality TV is selling people's sort of trauma for entertainment. And
yeah, well, that's been true for a long time, but maybe we're finally calling it like it is.
No, I was going to say, also, I guess I don't know how to calibrate content costs, but I thought the whole point of reality TV was that it's basically UGC and super cheap. $50 million for 9 episodes of The Bachelorette seems kind of expensive. How much are they paying these contestants?
Maybe the booze got expensive. I don't know. Inflation.
It's probably the insurance and legal bills to do this. I'm not even kidding.
Sponsorships too. But no, Angela, you are our resident reality TV expert. So
yeah, we rely on you.
Yeah, but people were talking about the cost of Sora, and people were doing the math around how much
it was burning a day.
But look at humans, how take nine episodes, 40 minutes, that's an insane per minute burn cost too.
Angela, you sound like Sam did when he was people talk about how expensive it is to train AI, but think about growing a human. To feed it and give it shelter and electricity. So I feel like you've been Sam-pilled. No, the Sora thing is wild. I guess I'm not surprised because I haven't heard anyone talk about Sora since that brief window of post-launch flurry of content creation, and then all the people I know who were very active there, and I was never one of them, just stopped. So I don't know if there was a little Sora subculture still exists on Clubhouse today.
We talked about Sora on Great Chat season 3, and we are now in season 4. So Sora lasted exactly one Great Chat season.
Wow. This is how we will.
That's how we will measure. That's how fast things are moving. Yeah.
All product longevity. I think the most interesting thing about Sora getting shut down is that it is part of a broader reevaluation of side quests, and yes, a refocusing of OpenAI on its core business, and maybe even a little bit of a pivot into the enterprise business. And people are saying this is the Fiji era, and it's just interesting contrast to Sam, you can just do things. And then Fiji's let's just do one thing. And it is really interesting. Helen, I remember you talking about it feels like OpenAI is doing a lot right now. And we've sort of had these really fascinating parallel case studies of OpenAI doing a lot of things. And it felt like that was working for them for a while, at least from a momentum and narrative perspective. But Anthropic has been super focused, and now you're just seeing the compounding benefits of being really focused on Claude and Claude Code, and it feels like they're shipping new features every single day. So yeah, fun to watch this race in real time.
Yeah, I did say that it felt like Meta was fighting a battle on too many fronts. But at the same time...
Meta or OpenAI?
Excuse me, OpenAI. Well, that's going to get to my next point. But I felt like, to the Fiji point, Facebook was pretty good at being like the everything app, right? And OpenAI, and I mean, it's not, you can squint and kind of see how like OpenAI could be the everything app. I mean, they've got so many ex-Meta executives that are familiar with how to do that pretty well as well. So, one thing that I've been thinking about is like the value of ChatGPT being synonymous with AI for so many consumers. Like there's value in that inherently. And I think when I think back to like the Facebook developer platform, like 2010-ish, like Zuck's vision of like, we want Facebook to be like your passport to the internet. Well, OpenAI, I would say probably has the best chance of being like somebody's identity platform across like all of these new AI tools and every like sort of AI enabled app or, extension of existing software. And so I don't know, like I still think that is a reasonable move for them to make, which is why the focus to me actually came as like a little bit of a surprise. And there's this other narrative of like, does the way that Anthropic does accounting, is it different than OpenAI? So like, are they that much far ahead in the developer and enterprise sort of like revenue than we think?
The ARR definitional battle.
Yeah, exactly. So
led by their investors.
Yes, of course. But it's not a bad point, right? And so like, yes, Sora shut down. Like, yes, there's probably a focus on things that are going to be, more revenue generating, but like, I wouldn't count out like the opportunity that OpenAI has to like, I think be pretty broad.
Oh, I don't think anyone's counting OpenAI out like remotely, but it is an interesting moment for the company. And I thought especially the narrative around focusing on enterprise was surprising because like you, I do think they have just such a unique advantage in consumer just being synonymous with AI. So we'll see what happens.
We'll see
And
what happens.
maybe their PR team is like feeling the pressure a little bit because one of the things we shared this week in the group chat was the snarky comment from the OpenAI spokesperson about the RAMP data.
Right.
So what happened basically is RAMP puts out these reports based on its data around like what software is picking up steam across its customers, which are probably mostly like startups or medium-sized businesses. And I think it showed, it must have showed like Anthropic pulling ahead, and the OpenAI spokesperson was asked for comment. And they basically said, well, that's like measuring like the sale of lemons by my kids' lemonade stand. And the funny thing is, I was talking about this with a comms friend, like you absolutely can push back on that, right? Like, like Ramp's customer base is mostly X. These are mostly like credit card transactions. Large enterprises aren't running their OpenAI subscriptions through Ramp. And so this is not the right sample set. But because the person was salty, it like drew all this attention and it looked so defensive. And what my comms friend said is this feels very Facebook circa 2017 when you're like kind of on your back foot and you feel like unfairly maligned. It must have felt good in the moment to land that comment. And then later you're like, I should have just texted that to my friends. And that's why we have group chats.
That's why we have group chats. That's right. There is a whole category of things in my timeline that should have been in group chats.
Yeah, group chats will save us all if we let them.
Group chats and disappearing messages. Always turn on disappearing messages.
Oh, I'm not a big user of disappearing messages, but maybe I should
be,
or maybe
that up.
Or my life is like too boring. Speaking of drama, I feel like the company that's been in the spotlight over the past week is Delve.
Can someone tell, like, did we know Delve before? Like, what, like, I totally missed this whole saga. Like, what?
It's a baby Banta.
Exactly. SOC 2 compliance, and they were growing so fast. And I know from a lot of startups who were evaluating them against Fanta, they were just like, yeah, but Delve can just produce, can go just so much faster. And it's like, Fanta? And now we know why. No, I don't know if it was AI enabled. I think it was just compliance software that.
I mean, I'm sure there's some AI component, but like Vanta kind of created this category. There are quite a few players in it now that like the Delve drama has kicked up all this dust. There's like this meta commentary around, is is this whole category kind of a scam? And, you know, of course there has
A
to
little
be some
bit.
like broader thing. Well, I think like a lot of people feel pressure to get SOC 2 compliance maybe ahead of when they need it. And then I have learned more in the past week about how SOC 2 compliance works than I ever cared to. But it's funny. I feel like Delve's raised, I think, like $32 million. It's a YC company. And the reason I knew about them was because they've just been super aggressive on the marketing front. Like I had to mute their LinkedIn sponsored posts long ago, but they were very good at like activating their customer base to tell stories about how like they were able to get SOC 2 compliance in 2 weeks, which actually technically shouldn't be possible, according to some of the commentary around this moment. And so, Angela, the most interesting thing with this is the thing that kicked it all off was an anonymous Substack post, which, you know, of course, some people are hypothesizing was from a competitor, but someone wrote like a really in-depth takedown of Delve, and I think it was Aaron Griffith at the New York Times who tweeted it out, and then it just like went viral. Oh, and of course they're Forbes 30 under 30, so it fits into that meme. Like it's kind of like, oh, once this story got out there, there was no chance for them to rein it back in, and then I did think their public response was like a little bit lacking and a little bit hand wavy. So, Helen, I was thinking about you because this brought up a conversation around like the sort of marketing, like customer logo pages and slides. And Delve did something really sneaky where the logos it was showing were the customers of its customers. And like the language was like, we help close the loop. And you think this means they're like the SOC 2 compliance partner of record for all these like OpenAI or whatever it was. But it's like, no, one of their customers does business with one of these companies. And so it sort of kicked off this broader discussion around pretty hand wavy marketing. And yeah, so Delve is our latest drama story.
Well, Ashley, your point about like it being an anonymous tip blog post, I mean, like Twitter is hard for me these days because there is a new big account that's like a secret, or excuse me, that's like an anonymous, something capital. Like it pretends to be like a venture firm and it just does tips.
Are you talking about Ramp Capital?
There are like 3 more that just popped up this week. And they're all just like giving tips on like who's raising and at what valuation, or like, it's just sort of this, this is such an old school thing for me to say, but it's like, that was Facebook's value proposition back in the day to advertisers, that like people generally behave on the platform because they use their real name and likeness. And that's like a rule. And like Twitter doesn't have that, right? And like now I'm kind of seeing it where it's like, this platform's become unusable to me, even if the content is entertaining. It's just sort of like these anonymous hotlines. I mean, this is just like you said, like it's like secret, right? But like,
yeah,
that crashes out pretty fast.
It is really interesting because like, and I know we've talked about secret on the pod before, maybe because I have so much trauma from it. But the interesting thing about secret was it was still in an era where the risk was you were going to get an email from a reporter asking for comment. And so like, it wasn't like, oh, there was something on secret and then suddenly everyone was talking about it and a story was out there. It was like, oh, there was something on secret. I remember when Box was on file to go public and it had been delayed. Someone posted on secret, Helen, maybe from Dropbox. I hope it wasn't you.
It was me.
This is when the pod ends.
The truth comes out.
Yeah, exactly. Been holding this for 12 years. Yeah.
But, it was like Box is getting acquired by HP. And suddenly I have like 3 reporters like calling me or in my inbox asking for comment. And like I was able to handle that, right, in the way that you do, where you don't comment on the record, but you're like, this has no. First I have to ask, are we getting acquired by HP? Yeah. And then, you're like, we don't comment on rumors and speculation, but also no, we're not getting acquired by HP.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was so much harder in the internet age, right? Because like, I mean, it's funny that Aaron Griffith from the New York Times was someone who helped, give this story. It almost like her tweeting it out gave the anonymous Substack some credibility that it wouldn't have otherwise had. But like the story was baked well before TechCrunch eventually wrote it up, but that was like 2 days later. And like, on the internet, we were already in like a different phase of analyzing the situation. And I think it's really hard on social media to deal with information and especially misinformation. And so, I mean, I have no horse in the SOC 2 fight, and no direct interaction with Delve, and no idea how scammy or not scammy they are. But, watching this unfold, you're like, oh shoot, like how are they you don't get to put this like genie back in the bottle.
Yeah. And I just feel like it won't end well. And, like the thing with these anonymous accounts, they gain a ton of followers really fast. So they look legitimate. And now, we're wasting like actual company resources, like what you just mentioned at Box, like actually like, responding to these sort of, accusations. Like they're not, when they're anonymous, right, it brings up a whole host of questions that wouldn't otherwise. And so
totally.
I don't know, like if that's what the future of X is, it's like I'm just like not that interested.
Yeah, you also don't want to set a precedent that you weigh in on every anonymous like, I mean, and that was challenging in the like media era where you didn't want to set an expectation with reporters that anytime they brought you any crazy rumor, you were going to guide them. It's 100x harder in an era where those conversations are happening publicly. So it's interesting. Maybe the best path is still the Huberman path. Just post through. Maybe Delve should have just been like tweeting out its logo slide and moving on with life. But yeah, it's a whole new crazy environment. And I wonder also if like there are companies paying attention to this as a potential like competitive tactic, because companies do shady things like this when it comes to their competitors.
That was sort of the point I'm getting to, which is I feel like seeing how this went down in a very short amount of time, I'm sure we're going to see more of it unless there is some action to like, disincentivize this from happening. So,
what I saw that was so interesting, speaking of disincentivizing, did you guys see Nikita's tweet this week? So Nikita runs product at what we now are supposed to call X. I guess on the revenue side, they are deprioritizing engagement from audiences that aren't in the country that you're in. And it is specifically designed to prevent people in other countries trying to mess with like the US political conversation or something. If you are in like Sri Lanka and you are getting people all riled up and you're like making money from that. So I thought that was interesting. There were definitely some Twitter influencers who are not happy about this because I think a lot of their audience is like not in the US and they want to keep making money. But it was interesting to see Nikita and X like actually make some kind of move.
Yeah. Well, I think Elon then commented and said that this decision has been put on pause until further.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh.
So,
oh my gosh.
So the chaos will continue because I think, like this talk of incentives, like I just feel like there are too many incentives for chaos and we need to like figure it out. But hey, in this sort of like laissez-faire, free markets approach, I'm maybe a little cynical that we're just going to keep seeing more of this.
That is truly funny that it is already, I guess if your whales are upset, you don't want to rock the boat too much.
I'm very impressed that it stayed like only focused on companies though. Like I guess people aren't gossipy or vengeful enough to turn it into like
I'm sure
founders or VCs or like it's been like at that company level. It hasn't gone down to like the personal level yet.
I think the personal level is more uncomfortable for other people to pile onto. Like you need a real accusation. And so I also just wonder if like a random startup that people aren't on the cap table of is like much easier fodder, especially if you get to sound like noble and good. But yeah, like going after an individual is probably, I don't know. I mean, speaking of individuals going after each other, there was the Emil Michael headline in TechCrunch about how he still had a grudge against Bill Gurley. And I'm just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. What was the particularly artful line he said?
Listen, that is a man on a vengeance mission. And
forgiving would be like letting the Wuhan Institute of Virology slide back into a good reputation because the new senior manager of pandemic causation has made more friends than his predecessor.
Was it ever actually confirmed, first of all? Like,
That's a great question. He's undermining his own argument here by.
I think he's playing to an audience that considers it confirmed. So it works for those purposes.
Did Bill Gurley ever respond, or did Benchmark respond,
No.
or they let it die?
I think Bill is like staying out of this. He's on his book tour. Like, he doesn't benefit from rolling in the mud on this at all, especially in this particular like narrative environment, and let Emil have his headlines and maybe work through some of this grief.
Okay, let's talk about something that's been on our minds, and I doubt this is going to be the last time that we bring up this topic, but this past week there has been more scrutiny around like the sort of math on post NVIDIA conference excitement last week, right, where you're seeing just how big of a business that they're building, and that they are they're a great toll booth collector, and they're one of the great beneficiaries of this AI boom. And so more people started to dig in on the math of like how these hyperscalers, like how they're spending insane amounts of money on AI data centers, and just generally like the CapEx calculations looking like something that we just haven't seen before. And so this question of like, are we in a bubble? What does this mean? What does this mean for my day-to-day? What does this mean for the industry? Has just come up. And I think we've seen more think pieces and analyses on this. So wanted to bring it back to this group on sort of like how we're feeling about like where we're at in this moment. And, yesterday was YC demo day, which is a great sort of, it's a good marker of where we are in time, because it happens a certain number of times a year, right? It's like a good cadence, and
it's a barometer.
Absolutely. And, we've been meeting companies over the last couple of weeks pre-demo day, and, their expectations on raising were like, the most of them are raising like 4 on 40. And then some of them got term sheets for 50 or much higher. And last, batch, the number was more around like 35. And so you got to, I was just curious, like, well, what happened between last batch and this batch that maybe the median valuations went up like 10 to 15 million. It feels like, if you live in San Francisco and you're meeting early stage founders, right, and their expectations on their valuation is just compared to all of their friends who are raising at astronomical prices, like, the argument of, well, everyone else is raising at this amount, so I don't know why I wouldn't either, is true. And then VCs are paying up for it. So yeah, I think we are in a valuation bubble. I don't know enough to say that we're in a financial bubble. I definitely don't think we're in a technology bubble. I think that tech is actually meeting the moment and then some, and exceeding expectations on how quickly it's moving and it's improving. But the valuation part makes me feel like something's up.
I've heard from a lot of different venture capitalists over the past couple months they're either seed investors or they're Series A investors, and they are kind of like priced out of where rounds are ending up because they have their ownership targets, they have their check sizes, and those no longer align. And so I do think it's interesting. I wonder how much of this is the like multi-stage firms that are, like 30 post, 50 post actually like doesn't matter that much, because those seed investments are not going to drive fund returns. And so it's all about having the relationship with the founder, having the right to like double down at the Series A and put like lots more money in, later on. And so it is really interesting to hear like people sort of grapple with the fund math. I will say I'm still seeing lots of like pre-seed deals in our wheelhouse. And so I think YC is like a very specific part of the ecosystem, and there's still enough belief that like those companies have a better chance of like bigger outcomes that you can justify that math. But yeah, it just keeps creeping up each time.
Do you see that in later stage, Angela?
I feel like valuation has in some ways lost like all meaning. I mean, I'm sure you guys, it's a public company, but the news about Meta's new exec comp pay package and the sort of $9 trillion, market cap where it starts paying out value. And like, I don't even know how to think about, it's $1.5 trillion, which is already hard enough to think about. Like, how do you wrap your mind around like what business is worth $9 trillion? So it feels like there is a like barbelling out in terms of the big companies, like have just reached levels and have ambitions to reach levels that we haven't seen before. And then there's a bunch of other companies at the other end of the spectrum that are all sort of competing to exist at this smaller status and have no ambitions of becoming $9 trillion companies. So it's almost, you have to make your bet. Either you're going to plow capital into companies that are just going to aggregate all the capital, or you're going to make your return on a different set of companies. But I don't know if maybe that's not how earlier stage investors see the market.
We want the $9 trillion companies too, Angela. I'm like happy to take one of those.
Maybe even the $1.5 trillion company.
$1.5 trillion. I mean, the math on that for a small fund is beautiful.
Okay, but even like, okay, let's, the thing I just said before about measuring time across great chat seasons, I feel like I was like in this room when I said, when we were running some of the numbers on some of these new venture fund sizes and what the return profile needed to look like in order for them to return the fund or to whatever, 5x the fund. And it's like, you're betting that there is $1 trillion outcome inside the portfolio. And we were like, ha, 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 how many $1 trillion outcomes are there? And now we're talking about how, like, yes, there need to be multiple $1 trillion outcomes, or Facebook now has a $9 trillion target. I mean, that's how quickly things are moving. And yes, I actually think, reiterating the point of, I do think technology is moving that fast. So it is possible, but I just, watching the valuations and expectations of like market sizing, like moving this quickly, like it feels unsustainable. And I don't know, on the other hand, I don't know what will make it stop other than like a correction. Like, we're not just going to be like, you know what, guys, we've been going too fast. Like, let's slow down. Like, I think there needs to be like that's not the game. Like, you go faster and you continue in one direction, unless it comes to like a screeching halt.
Isn't it wild that it wasn't like that long ago that we had our first $1 trillion market cap company? And like, that was such a big moment. And then suddenly there were 2, and suddenly there were 3. And now we have these IPOs lining up for later this year where, it is possible that one of those could hit $1 trillion. And so it's just like, things are changing so quickly. I do think that like the reality is tech is just a much, much bigger part of the economy. And so we are going to see, some of these crazier outcomes. The question is how many? And then I think we're in this era where a lot of people believe that the value capture is going to be concentrated in just a few businesses. That's why people are still scrambling for Anthropic SPVs. It feels like compared to 2025, 2026 is only more concentrated, right? We've had the massive Anthropic and even bigger, like 110 billion OpenAI raise. Feels like every day there's a new fundraise. I think Kleiner announced another 3.5 billion today, which is actually like modest compared to, what A16Z did recently. And so yes, these are big numbers. And I also think these big numbers are responsible for some of the, like, more responsible for the valuations we're seeing than, Angela, to your point, any real, like, evaluation of value, right? These mega funds have to plow meaningful amounts of money into companies that can absorb it and where they believe that they can have that significant outcome that moves the needle for these funds. And so I don't think this has any sign of slowing down unless, there is some like we hit some bubble or some moment that makes everyone recalibrate.
I mean, I think we're in the bubble. I mean, most people agree we are in the bubble. It's really the question of like, when's it going to pop? Right?
Oh yeah,
or
that's
like,
what I meant.
yeah. Like, are we at the peak, or when was the peak? Was it behind us? Is it still ahead of us? I think it's probably still ahead of us, but like, I'm a little bit of a doomer, thinking that it's probably more closer than a lot of people think it is. But to your point about like, what the valuations being meaningless, like, you also have to like understand that the mega funds, like, they just, they have a business too, and they need to win competitive deals. And if it means that they offer a better price that wins the deal, then they'll do it, right? And so like, you just see how these things sort of compound, and it's not any one chaos agent's fault as to why we're here. But I think, to me, the definition of a bubble is like when the rules of the game are such that like it creates this sort of situation, you're in a bubble. And like that's what I think we're at. And I Your question about like what do early stage investors do and what do, early stage founders do when they look at this is a good one. And I just continue to go back to like, I think the best thing about being a really early stage investor and being early in your, founding journey as a founder is that like you can choose paths, right? Like
Yeah.
the farther you go in the journey, there are fewer paths available to you. And the best thing about being, starting now is that you can decide that you're going to have like a cash flowing business that maybe needs a little bit of startup capital to get off the ground, but like, you want to be in charge of your own destiny. And so getting to profitability and like, having your choice about what the road ahead looks like is the advice I give broadly. And I think what's great about being a pre-seed investor is that it's not crazy that a founder takes your check and then they never take more money.
It's interesting being here in Europe when I'm walking around the streets in London and Zurich. People are not talking about OpenClaw. People are not talking about agents. They're talking about other things. And, it's like you step outside of the bubble and you realize how little most of the world thinks about AI. And that leads me to two minds. One, which is like, who is doing the better thing? Is it better to not be obsessed or is it better to be obsessed? But then also, if AI is going to be like the acceleration engine, entire economies, countries, like populations are just going to be really left behind in such a dramatic way. And I describe the mood in San Francisco to people here as simultaneously euphoric because all of these people believe that they have the ability to reach trillion-dollar valuations, and then also total despair because people are seeing the value, like what is being created and the power of the technology. And so I feel like we in the bubble live on this duality where there's both like simultaneous euphoria and then simultaneous despair. And it's a constant cycle back of which one is which. Like just take SaaS. Like for a while it was like SaaS is dead, and then it was like SaaS is recovering, and then just kidding, Anthropic release something and SaaS is dead again. It's like this constant like duality. And I just feel like it makes living in the bubble even more stressful than before when it was more just one-sided, like everything to the moon. So I don't know. The jury's still out for me. Maybe it's better to be happy and oblivious than living in the bubble.
I'm happy for Europe. It sounds like a much better place to go spend the summer, maybe.
I posted a text on my stories about, my husband sent me a text being like, how do you feel if I buy a Mac Mini to like set up my OpenClaw agent? And like half the people who like live in SF were like, LOL, that's so like 3 weeks ago, like he's so behind the curve. And then like the other segment of people who like don't live in San Francisco were like, I don't understand. Like, what does this mean? And again, I was like, does it matter? Like, is it better to know? Is it better not to know? Like, I don't know. So, that was it was like a funny, like personal test of like, oh, there's such a dispersion in response to something.
Yeah. I was in New York last week and then LA the second half of the week. And, I talked about San Francisco quite a bit. And I said, like, it's just very, very dense with people who are very, very smart and work in tech and are very online and are following every single move on an hourly basis of like where the technology is going, what all the biggest, players and investors are moving. And it's a full-time job to sort of figure out like how to skate where the puck is going. And so it has become truly like a monolith, like a one industry town where everybody does and reads the same thing, right? And that's pretty different than New York or LA. I keep coming back to like the thing that makes you stand out is sort of that you're so like really leaning into those things and, whether that's touch grass or just like figuring out a more artistic, way to express yourself. But I keep finding myself repeating those things over and over again, where it's like, you got to figure out what makes you and, sort of like hold on to that is more important than ever because everyone's sort of turning into the same.
Honestly, the more time I spend with other people, the less anxious I am. Like when I have like a good I had a great conversation with someone this morning and there were so many cool ideas. And I was just, I'm like, oh, this is actually my favorite part of the job and of existing in this industry. And like, if we want to automate some of the other stuff, like all good. But also I'm in New York, so I have less AI-induced psychosis than than the rest of the pod.
I was going to say, speaking of automation, we have to give a shout out to Mac, fellow pod queen, and Hadrian opening their ginormous factory in Alabama to automate things, shipbuilding, I think. So
Yes, that factory was stunning. And they had Leonard Skinner perform. What a cool moment.
Yay, Mac. Good job. We miss you. Come back next week and tell us about it.
Mac is on a beach somewhere, just recovering.
It's been an intense couple of weeks.
Well, speaking of, good pod, guys. And we'll see everyone next week.
All right, see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Great Chat. Have questions for us? Make sure to submit them at anothergreatchat.com. See you next week.